Hey there, my name is Vaughn, and this is the Vaughncast Show. This is a podcast that focuses on mental health, breaking societal stigmas, harm reduction, addiction, and recovery. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, follow the podcast Instagram at the Vaughncast Show, where I post video content from the show. All right, let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Vaughncast Show. Hope you are doing well. Happy Friday. Today I have Stephanie Olano on the show. Glad you're here today. And today we'll be talking about ADHD. It's something you specialize in among many other things. But today we'll be talking about ADHD, pretty much, the basics of it, how it impacts the executive functions, seeing ADHD as a superpower, and how to manage it. So first question is, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Fridays are kind of like my admin days, but also days where I can do podcasting and any other fun projects along with my job. So yeah, I really appreciate my Fridays. And I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. Me too. This is a very near and dear topic to me. As listeners would know, I have ADHD as well, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people listening also have ADHD. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So again, my name is Stephanie Olano. I am the owner of a virtual private practice called Todos Therapy. I started it back in 2020. I got very tired of working nonprofit, and there was a time to make the transition. It would have been during the pandemic for a lot of folks. We were just getting used to having sessions online or on Zoom like this. And I was like, all right, well, I like the idea of working from home for the first time in my life. May as well try it out. And yeah, I don't regret it. I love my job now and have found a new passion for ADHD. I noticed that a lot of the clients I did kind of click well with happen to be on the spectrum or have some type of neurodiversity in them. And I just never put two and two together. I just thought like, oh yeah, you're a cool person. Like, why not? But didn't realize like that was my calling, or that's possibly like a niche I need to go into. And yeah, I would have never come about unless like I had started my private practice. So yeah.
Awesome. Also, you're from the Bay Area. Much love from the Bay Area. The Yay Area, as you called it.
Born and raised, yeah.
Yeah, the hyphy movement in 2006 was big. That's when I was like out there. It's fun. I miss it. Okay, so can you tell us about the basics of ADHD? Just a very general, brief rundown.
Yeah, I think with, TikTok, I think so many people are like, yeah, I'm well versed in ADHD, but basically, the brain has an executive function. There's something going on there. Either it's too overstimulated or it's understimulated. And that could lead to very interesting behaviors or decisions. And the reason the executive function part of the brain is kind of focused on or looked at, when we're talking about ADHD is because that's where like decisions are made. That's where impulse control lives. That's where things like, I have a passion or I have a desire to do something. And, it just kind of like that person doesn't have really much control or much like say and like, I'm going to focus on this for right now. So the metaphor that I give is, let's say the brain is kind of like your CEO. Like that is the person in charge of your whole system, your whole body. But the secretary, that's the executive function. That's the executive, that is in charge of like, okay, who needs to come see the CEO? And there's this huge line. There's this huge line of like, that line can consist of folks who say like, okay, you need to eat lunch. You need to get out of bed. You need to go to work. You need to focus on a task. You need to clean your room. Huge line. And the the assistant is kind of there to be like, all right, you're next. Makes sense. It's that time of the day where you need to have lunch. May as well. But sometimes maybe that assistant gets a little bored. Maybe they're like, you know what? I don't think lunch is really important right now. I think you should go on TikTok for like 5 hours. That seems to make more sense right now. Or maybe they're overstimulated and it's like, you know what? You know what makes better sense than lunch? Time to go out and go shopping. Time to go out and just totally procrastinate at your job or whatever task is just really challenging you or just, too much for you. We'll just go out shopping instead or totally like hang out with our friends, even though we know we have to be doing something else.
Yeah. I really like that comparison. When you say it like that, it makes so much sense. Because for me, I don't like cleaning my room. And a lot of times on my day off, I could be, I should clean my room, but, going on Instagram for a long time sounds better, or, it's fine. No one sees it but me. But then when I look at my room, oh man, this needs to be cleaned. But I get really, get anxiety and oh man, there's so much to do. Let me distract myself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So executive functions for me, it's tough. I have impulse issues. I have addiction issues. I'm a recovering addict. And yeah, there's this thing in my head. It's like, yeah, let's go do it. Even though I know the consequences, I don't always make the best decisions. But yeah, I totally agree with that. It makes sense when you put it that way, that mm-hmm. Your brain's the CEO and part of it is like the assistant. And a lot of times I don't want to do certain things, or it seems like it's almost impossible, Yeah.
And sometimes that assistant, like at the end of the day, that assistant is really trying its best to help you. Like it is not trying to sabotage you. It is not trying to like make things difficult. It just really thinks it's making the best decision for you. And this is why I call it more like a superpower, because that assistant probably is operating like on intuition, or it's operating on like very limited information, because our system and our body, our minds, like they're always trying to figure out like what's the best way for you to survive, and my job as a therapist is to kind of help you understand like, okay, like what is your body telling you? Why is it that we go to things like, scrolling on our phones for hours of the day, or all these behaviors that may be quote unquote problematic? Like, why is it so easy to turn to that and not these other tasks that or believe like are more important or need to be prioritized, and how do we make it more fun? Because there's a reason why you're going to the better or fun things, like your system knows like, yeah, like this is just better for us. How do we make this other thing that may be quote unquote boring or maybe too overstimulating? Like, how do we make it more approachable for you? And that's where systems come into play.
Right. So for me, for example, like there was this thing I heard like back in the day, like there was this test where if you leave a cookie out for a kid and mm-hmm. you can eat it now or you can eat it later. I was one of those that would eat it now as opposed to later. And I think there's mm-hmm. delayed gratification. I'm working on that because for me, I want the fun now. And sometimes I try to reward myself like, oh, if you do these tasks, reward yourself. But a lot of times my reward isn't like always realistic, or it's not the healthiest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is where like I would go down the path of like, why is delayed gratification like so difficult? Because for a lot of us, like we could also be operating with some trauma. We could also be operating on like your body is trying so hard to keep you in that survival mode, or that it's unfamiliar with like that thriving mode, because thriving means like you can have the luxury of like delayed gratification. But if you're in survival mode, your system knows like if you don't have that cookie, you're probably going to die. Like something bad is really going to happen, and we don't know any other way. So I would kind of like remove the judgment and the criticism of like, well, if you have a background that says like, if you don't have the cookie, like something really detrimental is going to happen to you and your system. And everything in your body is telling you like, but this is what we do to get to the next day, then of course, like you're going to choose the cookie. Of course, you're going to like make these decisions that, yeah, someone else could be like, well, why didn't you just wait? But if it's a do or die situation, why are we placing so much blame on you? And how do we get used to, how do we have your body understand like, wait, you're not in survival mode anymore? That worked when we were in that situation, but how do we move you closer to this thriving mindset? You are safe, you are stable, you are healthy. So let's make decisions that are aligned with that a little bit more.
For me, I don't use drugs anymore or alcohol, but a lot of times I notice that when I get home, everything is good. I doing good financially to a degree. I'm not really like craving drugs, but I'm at home. I'm like, what is this boredom? Lately, it's been tough for me to just like chill. It seems like I'm seeking out that chaos that I used to chase, but I know it's not, I'm not going to use drugs and alcohol, but it's manifesting into other things. I don't know. Like, I could just chill. It's like delayed gratification. I can just chill or go out and do something spontaneous and I'll feel a lot better. I see it with what you said. It's almost like another addiction, but it's like I'm chasing that. I want to feel good now as opposed to just chilling out. Cause I know I could just chill at home, watch YouTube, watch movies, for free. But I want to go out and do stuff that's going to cost more money. And it's like, well, you could have just chilled at home, but here you are going out when you just needed to like relax. But a lot of times I can't relax. Can you kind of speak on that?
Yeah. So I'm hearing like two things. It's like maybe we're not used to like things being chill and relaxed, because that can happen too. Our homeostasis is kind of meant for like, or we're just more familiar with the chaos in our lives, And so to be in an environment that says like, no, like everything's good, like there's no fire, there's no crisis, that can feel a little weird, and it might feel like unnerving. I always provide the example, like, so when I moved, I grew up, in Daly City, right near the BART station. So I'm used to like very like city-like noises. But when I moved to my college campus, which was more like woodsy, there was like a deer reservation on campus. It was really quiet for me. Like I was used to like, buses coming at various hours of the day, like a lot of people outside my window, and to go to like a woodsy area that didn't really have that, I felt a little panicky my first month there. And I had to, many years later, it wasn't until I went through therapy school, I realized like, oh, my ears and my body were so used to noise. It was so used to noise, and not having that in my environment just seemed off. Because people pay a lot of money to like go to the woods and, have that type of tranquility or quiet. But my body was like, this is not your peace. This is not okay. And the other thing I heard was boredom. ADHD brains and boredom, that's like the kryptonite. Like that is like the worst thing you can do to an ADHD brain. It's worse than torture. At least torture, like you can kind of find maybe some type of dopamine after a certain point. But boredom, oh my God. Like, I think people underestimate, like, ADHD brains cannot be or thrive in that. They can't be still. And that makes total sense why, like, maybe we can't sit with that a little bit, or maybe we can't, like, overcome it in some way.
Yeah. So what would you tell clients about some basics of how to manage that? Because I know that physically I can't always be out and about. I need to learn how to almost sit with it. What would you tell clients when they say, oh, I have a hard time sitting still, similar to what I'm experiencing? What would you tell them about boredom and if you have ADHD?
I would try to understand, like, why is the thing so boring? Like, if it's chores, makes sense. Like, who wants to clean their room? If it's something at work, maybe we need to find more challenging tasks or things that we need to learn to make it more interesting, because the brain, ADHD brains thrive on novelty, and this is why it can be so frustrating, because ADHD brains, like after a certain point, like once they achieve something or, they um, they feel like they're an expert in something, it gets boring to do the same thing over and over again. You know? So how do we find or capture that novelty feeling in the task that you probably quote unquote is boring? You know? And that's where like that delayed gratification comes into play. Like maybe we need to gamify things. Maybe we need to create systems that require you to learn something new. You know? It
Right.
takes some time. It takes some time. It's not an overnight thing.
100%. You've mentioned systems a couple of times on this episode. What do you mean by systems?
So are you familiar with the book, Atomic Habits?
I am. I have a digital copy.
Yeah. So Atomic Habits really breaks this down into if you're trying to build a new habit or you have a certain goal in mind, then what are the steps that you have to do to make it more achievable? So I know like after like the holidays and New Year's, everyone decides like, I'm going to go to the gym and, you know, make my fitness or my diet journey like a main priority. But by March or April, like that goal is done. Like it is no longer a thing that they can do. Right. The thing that I would have my clients sit down with me about is, okay, how do we make this more approachable? Are you packing your gym bag the night before? Are you able to have easy transportation where you are able to go to the gym? Or do we need to have like a home gym setup? You know, like how do we make the steps more manageable and a little bit more automatic? Because I find with a lot of folks who have ADHD, the main reason they don't like to do things or it is hard to start a new habit is because it takes too many steps or they're struggling with things like decision fatigue. You know, at the end of every day, to make a decision of like, well, now I need to prioritize my fitness, but they're really tired or they're having like a low spoon day, it's just not going to happen. And sometimes we need to accept that. Sometimes it's okay to say like, I'm just not in the, you know, my energy level's too low to do this, or I'm just not in the right mindset. But if that's like an everyday thing, then we need to look at what is getting in your way and how do we make the steps just more approachable and more manageable.
Right. No, I like how you explained that. You're taking little steps. So miraculously, last Monday, I actually cleaned to a degree of my room. What I realized was I told myself, okay, don't put a time limit on it because I feel like for some reason when I put a time limit, I have to get it done at a certain time. I kind of just chilled out. I put on that, you know, that lo-fi music to study to on YouTube.
Love it. Yes.
I put that on. I just said, you know what? Just chill. I started little things here and there, you know, moving things around, cleaning my desk in a very relaxed environment. And it felt accomplishing, you know, and I realized, oh, maybe on my days off, I can kind of start with that. Just give myself time. Or for example, when I do podcast editing and all that, I love podcasting, but I really dread the work of editing and, you know, little clips for social media. So I just kind of tell myself, you know, when I wake up in the morning, just open the program CapCut and just, you know, drag something there, do stuff little by little. And for me, that kind of helps break down the process because it's overwhelming for me. I don't know how it is for a lot of people, but things like that, it's overwhelming. And what I've learned is kind of just give myself extra time.
Yeah. And maybe I can't help but think like when you're in CapCut or doing something more creative, is it a little bit better to have like a more organized or cleaner space?
When my place is a lot more organized, I feel good. You know, it's just not very organized. I'm looking at my room. It's not very organized, but I do feel less anxiety when I have a more clean space.
So that's the thing I would probably like remind you is like, wait, for you to probably have less anxiety or to probably be in that more of a creative flow, you know, why not have a cleaner space? And it doesn't have to be like you don't have to clean your whole house or your whole room. It could just be like where you do the creative stuff, like maybe your desk, like maybe you're more intentional about keeping that area more organized, you know, because, you know, we're both people of color. Cleaning in our communities is a big deal, you know, and with a lot of my clients, when they hear cleaning, they hear deep cleaning. Like they're cleaning the windows, they're cleaning off the walls, they have to, you know, clean their bed sheets. Like it's too many things. you know? So that's what I mean by creating a system or breaking things down is really, how do we create little steps? And if you're able to do your whole room, great, but it doesn't have to be like that every week or every day. It could just be a certain corner of your room. You feel it's needed to be a little bit more organized, and that's all you have to do. And that is enough. And that's the best thing you can do for yourself.
Back to cleaning. I think I need to clean more just because as people with ADHD, I misplace things a lot at work and at home. And it's so frustrating. And I feel like in my head, like, oh, this is why you should clean your room more often. Like I'm trying to find my keys, my headphones. And man, sometimes I get so upset, I just gotta like chill out. But yeah, definitely a plus of having an organized room is you find things a lot easier.
And that's what I mean by systems. So maybe we need to create like a certain, if you need like a dish tray or like a hook system, to find your headphones or make sure your headphones are packed in your bag so it's ready to go. That's what I mean by systems. You don't have to put in so much effort or mental load into finding these things anymore. It has a designated area, or you just know, like, past me kind of thought beforehand, like, I need to put this in my bag, or I need to put this in, on my desk where I can easily find it. And I will literally have my client like, show me your room, send me photos so I can get a better idea of what we're working with, and maybe I can give you some guidance or some suggestions and we can figure this out together. So because part of the problem with a lot of ADHD folks is they feel it's needed to figure it out on their own, and then society tells them like, well, just do it. Like, why is it so hard for you? I am hopefully here as like a sounding board of like, you don't have to do this alone. And that message of, well, just figure it out. Like, yeah, that's great. But those moments you can't do it or it's just impossible, rely on me. Like we could be a support system together,
Right. I'm a big fan of support systems. I attend 12-step programs and, part of it is you're not alone. I think when you isolate yourself, it doesn't always work out. So just talking to other people about it helps. Speaking of which, why can ADHD be traumatizing to the system?
So there's a lot new research of like what trauma does to the body. I'm assuming some of your audience members have heard of books like The Body Keeps the Score or what trauma can do to the nervous system. But basically, when our bodies, quote unquote, the nervous system, and this is where the nervous system is connected to our brain. This is what signals to like, so if, sorry, there's like so much I can like nerd out about this. 24/7, our bodies are like scanners. It is constantly scanning the room, the people you're around and saying like, okay, this person is okay to talk to. You can trust them. They're safe. Or you know what? This person is giving really bad vibes. Do not trust them. They are not safe. Like run away. Right. That all those signals are coming from our nervous system, and the nervous system learns from maybe our past experiences, maybe what we learned in childhood, maybe from situations that had really bad consequences. But either way, the nervous system knows like, okay, what is okay and what is not okay. But what's interesting is the nervous system is also connected to our brainstem. And that part of our brainstem is connected to our amygdala. Our amygdala is where the fight or flight response lives. And once that thing is on fire, if it is getting a sense that you are not okay, we can either fight our way out of there, we can run away, or what sometimes happens is we freeze. Like we just totally shut down and we just do it automatically. Like we have no say in that. Right? After a certain point, if our bodies and our brains are constantly going to that, like it is constantly, the amygdala is on fire, it does some damage to the body. And maybe our scanner, our sensor is a little bit more sensitive than others. But where it's a little different for ADHD folks is they're already built to have that intuition or have that, empathy a little bit more. And they can go into a room and be like, nah, vibes are off. I'm leaving. And there's no like, and they didn't have to interact with anyone or be in there for like a long period of time. They just know, right? That can be a little overwhelming because what could also be happening is they're probably struggling with things like sensory overload or being overstimulated. So maybe certain lights or certain sounds or, just certain tones really affect them, and to a certain degree, like that could be very traumatizing to the nervous system. So it kind of depends on like really how sensitive is your superpower. Cause the reason I call it a superpower is because it takes a minute for us to have that learning curve a little bit. And without it, we just kind of take on all these messages and all these situations. And if we don't have a way to process it or express it or kind of release it, it just stays in our system and we just bottle it up. And then it gets to a point where it's like, you know what, I'm just going to explode.
Right. You want to escape that. It's so overwhelming sometimes. It's flight, fight, or freeze. It gets so overwhelming. My experience that for a long time, I didn't realize that ADHD or any of these things. I started getting into drugs and alcohol. I felt like it would calm me. The smallest inconvenience I could remember, or really bad ones, or a really good time, anything to realize, anything to pretty much regulate my system. I would use substances and it would like mellow me out or make me feel good. Do you think there's a link between ADHD and addiction?
There have been a lot more research with that because I think if you have a body or a brain that is easily stimulated or overstimulated by certain environments or certain people or certain feelings, because ADHD folks, like they feel a little bit deeper. It isn't just like this mental thing that they have to overcome. It's like a physiological type of thing. Like when they feel sad, probably they get like a stomach ache or maybe even a headache. Maybe if they're angry, like they get like really intense about it, and maybe they feel like their face is turning red, or they feel like their blood literally boiling. Like it is like more intense than a neurotypical might have that same feeling. And if that is our nervous system is also plays a part of that, it might get dysregulated. And again, if it's dysregulated, we make interesting decisions. We get in that fight or flight mode and we're making decisions that looks like we're going crazy, or it looks like, we're being impulsive or making bad judgment calls. But that is because, again, we're trying to find that peace and that homeostasis. So I'm not surprised a lot of ADHD folks do turn to things like substance use, mainly like cannabis or alcohol, but not in the way that you think. It's not to escape a problem. It's more or less to help with the fact that they feel too much. And maybe for a little bit, it kind of numbs them, or it kind of like, it makes the world that's so loud kind of lower the volume just a little bit. And I don't know if that was your experience, but a lot of the times, like the folks that I work with, it's more like a medicine.
Yeah, for me, essentially what it did for me was it helped me just chill out or feel good or forget. Different drugs have different properties, but pretty much, yeah, that was a thing. And it just escalated a lot. I think it kind of goes back to, figure it out. I didn't like asking for help. That's a thing of mine still. I'm working on it. So a lot of it is ask for help. And I don't want to. I always felt like I was a burden. I knew that, my friends are going through a lot. Why should I burden them? So a lot of times I just kind of isolated and figured it out on my own. And fortunately, I didn't pick the best coping mechanisms. So I'm learning that now. But yeah, it's interesting. Also, too, I think it's a dopamine, right? I like novelty. I like feeling good right away as opposed to delayed gratification. I'm pretty sure if I picked up, if I picked up fitness, like walking or going to the gym or doing something like that, that dopamine hit wouldn't be as strong, but it would be more gradual and more, I don't know, regulated, as opposed to like ingesting drugs and alcohol. I feel great right away. So I think there's that too, again, with instant gratification.
Yeah. And I think instant gratification has like a negative connotation to it. Cause when we hear that, we hear like, oh, you're just not patient, or you're not like, willing to put in the work, to wait for that type of outcome. But when we're looking at just basic human needs, really delayed gratification shouldn't be part of the conversation. It's more like, okay, is this thing helping you feel safe and okay? And for a lot of folks, drugs or alcohol or whatever substance you're taking, it helps them get there a little bit sooner. So again, I don't blame people or criticize like for them having that option, but how do we add to that so we're not constantly going to that? If, something like substance use is kind of like not helping your life, what other coping skills or solutions can we add to that? So you just have more things in your toolkit or your arsenal a little bit more.
Right. Right. I agree. And I think at the end of the day, like you said, this is how like my younger self knew how to get by with situations, how to cope. And it worked all those years until it didn't. And now I'm trying to unlearn that, like, oh, it's all good. You're safe. Like I find myself getting anxiety a lot of times, and I'm realizing that, oh, you're good, man. I think it's just, I'm so wired. My brain's so wired with certain things that when certain things happen, I get anxious, and I just got to tell myself like, nah, you're good.
Yeah.
Also too, you talked about ADHD as a superpower, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I should have mentioned that earlier. A lot of times online, especially, we see like the downsides of it, and there are definitely downsides. Time blindness, where you kind of, your time kind of, you don't really like see times everybody else. It kind of just flies by, right? Let's talk about rejection sensitivity dysphoria. This is something I've been seeing come up a lot. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, it's that idea that like folks who are neurodivergent, or especially for ADHD folks, they feel like really hard. Like that it is. And if they feel or believe that they're getting rejected, or are perceiving like they're being rejected, it is like a literal punch to the gut. I've seen my clients who need to, rest or take a nap after like a situation like that. So if they believe like their good friend isn't texting them back because, they hate them or they did something bad, even though they didn't, but that's kind of where their mind goes. They feel like I kind of need a bed rot for a little bit, or I need to, go in my cave and just not leave and not be a part of the world right now because I am like, how dare I just hate myself type of spiral, and it gets a little out of control at that point. But basically it's more than just, a feeling. It's like this physiological, like this physical sensation, like, man, like I just don't feel okay in my own skin.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I always thought that like I'm super sensitive, or like you said, a friend doesn't text me back. I'm like, what did I do? Like, what did I do wrong? I don't even like this person anymore. I start spiraling. And I realized later down the road that like, people are busy. It's not personal. I tend to take a lot of things personal, just the slightest things. And I'm learning to unlearn that. But it's interesting that I thought I was the only one, but it seems like it's a common experience with many people with ADHD. Something about processing emotions, like feeling different. I think that's also one of the things with ADHD.
Yeah. And with something like RSD, what folks have to remember is that your intuition is telling you something, but it doesn't have all the information. I've heard the phrase, I got this from TikTok. It's not my phrase, but basically, when we have things like anxiety or depressive episodes, it's easy to kind of knit that sweater. Like, this person isn't texting me back. I make a line. Okay, what did I do? That's another line. What could, what could be happening? We make all these scenarios and these what ifs. And then after a while, we notice like it's a full on sweater. But I'm just knitting and making every knot and every little stitch into this whole big thing. And before I know it, like, this sweater is like almost stifling me when I wear it, or it's itchy, or it's just not comfortable, because what was initially like, it could be a caveat of truth there. Your friend isn't texting you. But things like anxiety, it likes to build this whole narrative or this whole story of like, well, they probably hate you, but how we got there is just this whole big thing, So what I try to do is basically, kind of what you just said, like, okay, what else could be happening? They may not hate me. They may not necessarily be avoiding me, but why is it that my brain automatically goes there? Did something happen where maybe that there was a situation, and it's trying to tell the brain and the body like, wait, this is not the same situation. That was a very different outcome, or that we can't automatically assume it's the same thing. But again, our brain, it's kind of lazy in that sense. Like, it likes to go off of like old information or just kind of old coding type of thing, and kind of create this whole narrative or this whole story of like, but this is the same thing. So we have to like challenge that and be like, no. My friend is a good friend. I know I can trust them. They will let me know if they're mad at me. But if they're not, then yeah, we need to work on that. We need to talk about that.
Right. Wow. If I would have known this in like 2010s or early 2000s, that would have helped me a lot, because a lot of times I read too much into things where like I called somebody, they didn't call back, or they didn't pick up, or something like that. Or, they make a vague thing, I'll post on MySpace and I think it's about me, or something on Facebook, or like, oh, they didn't like my comment or picture, little things like that. Really got to me. And I can't say that my drug usage helped. I think it exacerbated it. It made it a lot worse. And it was this vicious cycle, because I felt like, oh man, like, they don't like me. What do I do? Oh, I'm going to take some more drugs to make myself feel better, just to regulate. Looking back, I did it to regulate. Like, I think subconsciously in my head, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable because this person said no, or they didn't text me back, or this plan didn't work out. I knew that I wasn't feeling okay, but I didn't know how to express that or tell people. I didn't want to talk to people about it. So I figured it out on my own, and which was using drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. And I think what I can't help but think possibly what was also happening was there wasn't like direct communication. Things like texting or MySpace or, Facebook posts, like, we can be a little bit indirect or vague. And what is worse than boredom for an ADHD brain is indirect communication. I find with a lot of neurodiverse folks, like, they tell it as it is. They're very blunt. There's no hidden message. There's no like underlying thing there. They don't need to decipher, and because that takes a lot of mental load for a lot of folks. But within their own circles, if you're talking to another ADHD person, they tell it like it is. And I love that and appreciate that. I don't have to play this guessing game. But with certain folks or neurotypicals, yeah, there is that indirect messaging. And the ADHD person is left to be like, so what could this mean? Like, what's happening? You're not telling me what's happening. And I don't know, I'm guessing. And that takes a lot of energy at a certain point. So, and unfortunately with things like technology, as much it could help us and accommodate us, it kind of leads to that very indirect messaging. We need to talk has very different connotations, for a lot of people. When I hear it, it's like, oh, fuck, like, what did I do? But for a lot of folks, especially when you're struggling with RSD, that could mean like, wait, are they going to break up with me? What did I do? Like, oh my God, like all this shame and guilt is coming up,
I totally agree with that. My eyes lit up when you said that, just because it's so true. When I get hey, can you call me? in my head, I'm like, why can't you just text it? And then from there, it must be something bad. What did I do? When I was younger back then, just running around, not being the best person, I goes back to that. But, in relationships, oh, can we talk on the phone? Like, do you have time? I'm like, oh, what is this? What happens? And I get all defensive in my head. Or when family members go, hey, can we talk? Or even when they call me, I'm like, what did I do this time? And in general, it seems like there's nothing wrong, but I think I'm referring to previous things in the past that happened where a phone call would startle me. I'm like, oh shit, what did I do? So I get defensive on the phone. So earlier we were saying pretty much how ADHD can be detrimental with a lot of things. You say it's a superpower. Talk to us more about that. How can we view ADHD more of like a superpower than it is of a liability?
Yeah, so I choose the term superpower for a reason, but I think when other folks hear that, they think, oh yeah, like you've mastered it. Like you got it under control and it doesn't impact you in a negative way. The scenario I give is like, okay, I think we all know and love Batman, that story. Like he, had this tragedy hit him when he was a young age. He trained up and, became the savior of Gotham. Like that's the story we love, but the story that I enjoy is Batman Year One. Cause he is not the Batman that movies or most cartoons like depict him, where he's the expert in everything and has a gadget for like every problem. No, he is struggling in that story. He is figuring out like, okay, I have this training, I have the knowledge, but now I have to implement it in some way. And he is kind of fumbling a little bit. For those who are newly diagnosed or trying to understand how their brain operates or how ADHD really impacts their life, we're just understanding the superpower, and it's going to be a little weird and a little awkward, and it's okay if it's frustrating or you get mad or you get upset. This is what a lot of superheroes go through in the beginning, but we're just so used to seeing them in their outfit or their costume and, they got it together. No, the point that I love about heroes is like, they didn't start knowing everything. They started pretty much like us. They didn't know shit. They didn't know what would the outcome be.
Right. Oh, right. Another superhero came to mind, which I think it's a little more grounded because I feel like Batman pretty much always had money. Spider-Man.
Yes.
Spider-Man.
That was my other example. Yeah.
He has all these superpowers. He's saving the city. He's, rounding up these criminals, but his personal life is suffering. He misses dates with Mary Jane. He's late to work. To my knowledge, he doesn't get paid for being a superhero. So you see him like with financial issues. So it's very more grounded in that sense. I like how you say that, where ADHD brains, they might have like certain skills, but some parts of it, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like with Peter Parker, it's a double-edged sword. He's Peter Parker. He, with great power comes great responsibility, but his personal life suffers. He can't have a personal life. So when you said that, kind of clicked in my head. Oh, this is what you mean by superpower. Not like Superman, because I feel like he's this perfect being and no one can relate because he got
lucky with landing Earth. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess, his whole planet blowing up is not too lucky, but
no. It's not, but like, yeah, he just ended up in the right environment and the right circumstances and he benefited from it,
Right.
And I think that's why a lot of folks, as much as we like the idea of wanting to be Superman, I think the person that I enjoy most is Clark Kent, that character, because he had to like tone down his superpowers. And I bet at times it was kind of frustrating. Like he couldn't use like super speed or like fly around, but it shows like how humble he is and how like, no, like, that the good old boy type of mindset. Right. It isn't about me or trying to be better. It's like, I want to be part of the society and, not have it be about my ego,
Right. Right. So what are some ADHD quote unquote superpowers? What does what can the ADHD brain do more unique or different?
I love the creative side of ADHD folks. Like if you put them in front of a canvas, you allow them to, create, whether it's film, music, or anything. Like they just, I call it like they sometimes they have like one foot in the astral plane where I think a lot of, inspiration and artistic creativeness lives. And they're just able to tap into that a little bit easier than neurotypicals or other folks. The other thing that I always try to emphasize is I sometimes it may take a minute for your brain to process things, but the moment it can process it, you're good. You're good. We're just finding the right way for that coding to kind of like latch onto your brain a little bit. But the moment we understand that way to code, your brain can process things in such an efficient and beautiful way, you know? And the other thing is the feeling part. Although it can be detrimental and it can lead to things like RSD, I like folks who are, more empathetic and more compassionate to their fellow man because we need more of that. It's just learning how to like, if we need to let things go or process things or manage them a little bit more. But if the biggest issue is we feel too much, I don't know. Like I think for humanity's sake, like that's a superpower right there. And we need more of it.
Right. Knowing that too, I'm learning to like draw boundaries because I do feel for a lot of things. I'll see something on social media and it really upsets me, as it should. But a lot of times I got to tell myself, I can't, I'm only in control of like my actions and what I do. I have no control over outside people, places, or things. And a lot of times I have to, have boundaries for like that kind of stuff. And it's just tough because I'm very empathetic in that sense. It's just everything going on and just personal life things too. It's like, okay, I can't deal with this right now, but it's a work in progress. So with all this stuff, ADHD, we talked about the positive things and the things that make it more challenging. How do we manage ADHD? I know there's medication, which is great. It works for some people it doesn't. But say like without medication in general, how would we manage it?
Yeah. The thing that I would start to tweak is, why do we feel the need to manage it? Because trying to control ADHD, I know previous therapists or literatures, they try to emphasize like this is a behavior that we need to like outgrow or find a way to like control in some way. When really I'm all about like, how do we accommodate your ADHD? Like, how do we figure out what your brain thrives on and kind of lean into that a little bit more? So if, for example, you're at a job and maybe there's noises or an environment that isn't helping you focus, do you need an accommodation that like headphones? Do you need to wear like those loop earplugs that I see so many ads for? Like how do we make that environment just slightly more comfortable for you so you can get in that focus, more flow state that ADHD folks can get? Or how do we help you hyperfocus so you are able to, do those boring tasks a little bit easier? And I think we're still trying to figure out like how to do that because it's not a one size fits all. What may work for you may not work for the next ADHD person. But again, this is why like I love my job. Like I can help have these interesting conversations on like, what, headphones don't really do it for me, but eating pistachios at my desk does. Like coming up with that kind of creativity is why I love this job.
Right. No, I like how you frame that. How do you accommodate it? Because manage it kind of seems like it's inherently not good or something like that. This reminds me, are you familiar with Lord of the Rings?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Remember when Boromir said, but it's a gift? He's talking about the ring. That's what I think of.
Yeah.
For me, I guess like how I kind of manage it is how I cope with it or however you call it, accommodate with it is like, I kind of have to give myself more grace. I will forget things no matter how organized I could be. Sometimes I'll forget, sometimes I'll mess up. And I think this might tie into the rejection RSD. I feel so horrible. I'm like, how can I forget my keys? I'm like, how old? You know, how come I can't find my headphones or my, and I start spiraling. And that's, I think, when I need to like be more kind to myself, that kind of stuff. What would you tell clients like, hey man, I'm having a bad day, or like this ADHD thing is so difficult. What can I do? How do I make it less difficult and see it as more of a positive thing?
Yeah. And let's face it, like we all have those bad days, you know, but I think we kind of need to own up and accept like some days are going to be harder than others, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person or or whatever criticism you have. Cause I find that whenever you had mentioned like the example of misplacing your keys, that means like maybe I'm a disorganized person. Maybe I'm a bad person or not an adult because I don't know where my keys are. That's the thing that I would kind of sit down with my client and be like, why do we go there? Like, what about misplacing your keys has this automatic criticism or judgment about yourself? And how do we break that? You know, and how do we get it so you at least have some idea where your keys are? Maybe we need, again, like that system that we talked about earlier. Do we need to put your keys closer to the door? You know, and not knowing where your keys are. It's just not knowing where your keys are. We don't have to make it that deep, you know?
Funny story. I found this is a while back. So when I was using still, I found keys in the fridge. I found keys in the trash can. I remember we were scanning, where did I put my keys? I think we were pretty high. Like, oh, where did I put my keys? What the fuck? We're like tearing up the whole apartment, and keys were in the trash can. I don't know why I was there, or in the fridge. I was like, how did I get there? But we kind of laughed it off. But yeah, I don't know. I think like there are some days where I feel really good. Everything is clicking. I'm recording the podcast. I'm managing it. I'm doing good. Oh, go to work. Cool. Things go well at work. Some days where it's like, okay, it's so. And then there's days where it's like, it's really bad. And I think on those days, I just have to pretty much wake up, do what I need to do at work, go home. As long as I don't get high or drink. Yeah, laundry days today. I put all my laundry on one side of my bed. I'll fix it tomorrow. So I think there's those days I recognize and have to just be mindful of, because not every day can be a good day. As much as people who are super positive, it's great, but I'm just being realistic. Not every day can be good. I can be grateful of certain things, but it's not always good. So that's one thing I kind of tell myself too.
Yeah, and let's face it, like it can be hard to admit like it's a bad day or we're not feeling our greatest or our best. Like I know plenty of social workers or therapists who we know the signs, but it's just hard to admit sometimes, like, because we have shit to do. We have a long day ahead of us. We have to show up for clients or we have to show up for people who need us. And it can be hard to say, like, you know what, today's not the day, and then again, it's that guilt and shame cycle. But the moment we are able to be authentic and honest with ourselves, it leads us to a path of like, okay, how do I show myself that grace and that compassion? Because we're able to do it for so many other people in our lives. I bet if your friend or anyone else that you're close to says like, you know what, I'm not able to find my keys and I'm just not put together, I'm not getting it together type of thing, you wouldn't automatically say, oh, that's because you're not an adult. No, you'd probably be like, you know what? What's happening? How can I help? Like, what can we figure out together? That's how we need to show up for ourselves sometimes.
Right. I was going to make a joke. I'm like, oh, let's do some coke, but that's like out of the window. That was what I do back in the day. Oh, feeling bad. Let's do some drugs, man. Yeah. I looking back, I remember when I was having a bad day at work, I would think about the reward system. Oh, like, let's get some IPAs, get some fucking drugs. We feel good. And right away, my whole like mentality just changed. Oh, it's a good day. So I don't know. That was my old like trick, which I can't use anymore. Also too, I think when you said that, how come when you misplace things, you feel like you're not an adult? I think it's when you're growing up and you have that message given to you, like, how old are you now? You're still misplacing things, or how come your room looks like a pigsty, that kind of stuff. So I think that does trickle down and that does have an effect. And it's something I'm trying to unlearn because I'm just not organized. Like, I mean, at work I am for some reason, but in my room, it's like, whatever, you know?
Yeah. And I can't help but think like, at work, we have to be that way or else we're going to be unprofessional or a little bit like maybe not taken seriously. But at home, we can kind of relax a little bit. We can let our guard down, or else it wouldn't be home. Right.
Right.
But I can't help but think like maybe there's kind of a connection between like, okay, when I'm disorganized, I'm still that person who's probably still struggling with drugs. I'm probably still like that person who quote unquote doesn't have their shit together. And we're trying so hard to run away from that, but it doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't mean like, you are not good at adulting or you are a messy person, but there's still some struggle. Not the two types of struggle are not the same thing.
Right.
It's a different type of struggle and you're allowed to like still make mistakes. It doesn't mean you're an awful person.
Yeah. One more thing. Do you think there's that correlation between creatives being really creative and like being messy at the same time? Because sometimes when I'm in that mode, all I see is my laptop, all I see is my microphone. I don't care how messy anything is. It just like I kind of zone. I just kind of like have a tunnel vision. And like you said earlier, creatives like ADHD people are super. They just are super creative, but then they kind of lose track of like the stuff around them. Do you think there's some correlation between that?
I think that's more like hyper focus for a lot of ADHD folks. And what comes out of that or what that looks like is the creative process. Cause let's face it, like that's possibly like a source of dopamine right there. I don't like paying my bills or cleaning my room is probably like a little boring, but creating a piece of art, like that's where it's at. Like that is my brain on fire. Like, and it's a good type of fire. That fire can help me like not destroy things, but help me build something. And why wouldn't we want to participate in that? you know? And sometimes when we create, we're allowed to be like our most authentic, true selves, but also express whatever's happening internally to the outside world, you know? And
Right.
sometimes that does require hyper focus.
Right. Right. Cool. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for this cool conversation. I learned a lot, especially with RSD. It's pretty cool. I think it's a very new topic for me that I'm uncovering. Where can we find you online, or if people want to book you for sessions, where can we find you online and how do we do that?
Yeah. So exciting thing about me is I just got certified to do ADHD evaluations. There are some limitations to that certification, but if people are just tired of waiting for, their MDs or their psychiatrists to take them seriously, or they just want to know or are curious about where they are in their neurodiverse journey, they can come talk to me. My Instagram handle is Todos Therapy. You can also find me at todostherapy.com. And if needed, like you can hit me up on my email that is also found at, which is at help@todostherapy.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for this conversation. Learned a lot. I feel like the audience will too. Have a good rest of your day.